Welcome back to Another Thing. I'm proud to introduce you to Jerry Carino, who is a columnist for the Asbury Park Press and APP.com. You have one of my favorite jobs because you do human interest stories and human interest columns and introduce us to people we wouldn't normally meet. And recently you wrote a column about one of the 4 survivors?
3 survivors from Pearl Harbor who were in New Jersey.
That's amazing. And so, did he almost die?
Oh yeah, Ralph Jeffers, 95 years old, lives in Oakhurst, Ocean Township. He was on the USS Curtis, firing a gun at the Japanese planes as they were attacking. A plane crashed into his ship, and he says were it not for a tower, a crane that was on the ship, he would have been hit by the plane, saved his life. Amazing. For years he never told his story about what happened that day at Pearl Harbor and his service in World War II. And in the past few years, he's really started to open up and realize, hey, I have to tell my story. We can learn from our past. People need to know these things. And he has a great scrapbook. And it was a wonderful story to hear. I think he really values life. When you've been through something like that, that's what happens.
Yeah, does he talk about 9/11?
I asked him about it, and he said, it was so sad, and of course he immediately thought of the firemen, who were going up the steps of the World Trade and never came down. And that's the image that stayed with him, because they were in service the same way he was in service. And when you're called to do a duty, you have to perform that duty no matter what the duress or stress or danger. So he really identified with that.
Because, the reason I brought it up is because 9/11 is our generation's Pearl Harbor. And not many people, I would think, some younger people don't know as much about Pearl Harbor, of course, as they do about 9/11. It's difficult to think of a time in the future where 9/11's in our rearview mirror, and we're not talking about that as much. And some columnist is going out to find a firefighter that was at 9/11 so many years from now. Is he worried about us losing the perspective of Pearl Harbor?
No question, and that's why I was drawn to the story. I was alerted to it by his nephew, who said, he's 95, there's not many of them left. You have to tell this story. And I'm like, absolutely, it's a great story, it needs to be told. And that's why he's opening up. That's why he's 95 years old, but he's going to schools, he's speaking to groups, he's talking to reporters. He's got this meticulous scrapbook. He wants the story to be known. He knows there are not many of them left. 3 in New Jersey, maybe fewer than 2,000 overall out of the 80,000 that served that day. He knows he's one of the last, and this is sort of his last patriotic act, is to pass on his story.
What a wonderful story. Thanks for introducing us to him. You also have done a story about one of the, a tenor, one of the great tenors, one of the great tenors of our time. Is that fair to say?
An Italian tenor, Guido Ciccolini, who was considered to be a rival and an equal of the great Enrico Caruso in the early part of the 20th century.
And where did you find him?
It's just amazing. I happened to be flipping through a Find a Grave website, see if there were any notable people buried.
Let's stop for a second. Yeah. You were flipping through the Find a Grave website?
I mean, this is part of my job. I thought, what interesting people, we know about Vince Lombardi, he's buried in Middletown, he's the most famous. What other interesting people are buried in Monmouth County? And so Guido Ciccolini was a famous tenor. He was like a Springsteen of his day. And he was one of the first singing voices ever recorded by Thomas Edison's phonograph. And I said, I have to write this story.
And what did you find out about him?
Well, he has a family who still lives in the area, and they have great records from his time. Interesting thing, he was supposed to sail on the Titanic, had a ticket to sail. An opera performance in Europe got changed. He missed the boat, so to speak, luckily for him.
Yeah, thank God. One last story, and this one I love. Some guy you found, well, you tell the story, he's jumping in the ocean every day.
Got an email. This is how the great stories come about, Larry. When you do this, people notice. I got an email from a buddy of this guy. His name's Doug Madday, lives in Island Heights. The buddy said, my friend is jumping in the Atlantic Ocean every day for a minute, all winter long. He started in Labor Day, and he's doing it all year. I said, I have to go see this. So I went down, I met with Doug in Seaside Park. It was freezing. The water's 48 degrees. Doug jumps in, submerges himself. He's in the water for an entire minute. I put my feet in for 10 seconds. My feet are in pain. This guy goes in no matter what, nor'easter, whatever, every day.
What was the temperature the day you were there?
The air temperature was in the mid-40s, but the water was 48 degrees. I mean, it's so incredibly cold.
Why is he doing this?
Well, it's weird. At first, he started doing it as just something to do. It was almost like an endless summer thing. He calls it the middle-aged man in the sea, his little midlife crisis. But then it morphed into, I have to find a cause. So he's setting up a website where people can donate. Every day he goes in and people can donate to ALS research. And he's found a good cause that's close to his heart. It's really an interesting thing.
Oh, that cracks me up that he figured out he had to find a reason for it. And his reason before that was?
Yeah, just to do it. I mean, he was posting This is the world we live in. He was posting on Facebook. He was just doing it. And friends said, you got to make this more than just jumping in the ocean. And so he's going to do it.
Jerry, thanks a lot. Please come back
I will.
because you introduce us to some fascinating people. Jerry Carino, columnist for the Asbury Park Press, who deals with human interest stories. When we come back, we're going to talk to an author who hopes to have the hot new trend for the holidays, a reindeer to replace that elf.